I was planning on being here the last few days, but I haven't been feeling well, and so um, I just took that time to take care of my health. So I hope you forgive me. And the last time that I was here, we promised to start with my story that I wrote in February of 2022 called One Night Only at the Boston Theater. And I brought my tea. I hope you have something to drink too. It feels really good on the throat. Okay, this was a short story, like I said, that was published on February the 3rd of 2022. Okay, so I'm just going to get right into a story, and then maybe we can chat a little bit after that. It was my first night performing on stage. I was supposed to dance and then segue into singing an original version of the Beatles song, I Want to Hold Your Hand. But Matty had been drinking again and kept dropping his drumsticks. Glenn finally got tired of it and told him to go home and forget about being paid. Maddie's girlfriend started yelling at Glenn, and then she climbed up on the stage in the middle of the second chorus, and the audience went wild. They thought it was part of the show, and half of them were clapping and cheering. The other half would have thrown tomatoes if they'd been handy. Without the drums, the song fell flat pretty quick, so we let the music die out while Glenn pulled his girlfriend off stage, and we jumped right into an ear-splitting rendition of Johnny B. Good. It wasn't until right before the end of our last set that we noticed the audience wasn't making any more noise. We could see hundreds of swaying lighters as we sang the last slow song, but not a peep from the crowd. The final chords were dying out and we were making our way off stage, but still the lighters swayed. Glenn stepped up to the mic and announced that the concert was over with absolutely no effect. It was like the audience was hypnotized or something. He shrugged and turned to pack up the rest of the equipment. The auditorium lights all came on as we were making our way to the exit, but no fans met us on the outside. As we drove around the front of the building, the doors were still closed and no one was leaving. The marquee lights were on, flashing and sparkling over the sign that read, Boston Gems featuring Donna, one night only. Glenn pulled the van over to the curb on the next block, and we waited a few minutes to see what would happen. Our eyes were glued to the entrance doors for what seemed like an hour, but was really only about 20 minutes or so. Finally, Glenn couldn't stand not knowing what was going on. He decided to go back to the auditorium through the side doors and take a peek so he could see what the heck was going on in there. We couldn't talk him out of it. I wasn't letting him go by himself, and we all piled out of the van and walked quietly back to the building. It was silent all the way up to the exit door. Even when we opened it, we couldn't hear a sound. No shuffling, no coughing, nothing to indicate that there were over 1,000 people that had never left the building. Glenn opened the curtain to see down into the audience. We all craned our necks to see past him. The lights were still on, but nothing could have prepared us for what we were looking at. In front of the stage was row after row of empty chairs. We all gasped about the same time, a collective whoosh that was startling in itself, but where there should have been people picking up jackets and purses and finding their way to the entrance, there was nothing. No people, not a single person was left in the building. No one but us. To this day, we've never talked about it to anyone. Who would believe us? We were too traumatized to even discuss it. We never saw Maddie again after that performance. The band broke up about a month later, and we all went our separate ways. I saw Glenn last year and I almost didn't recognize him. He's in a wheelchair and I'm pretty sure he saw me, but he didn't seem to remember who I was. I will never know the truth of what really happened that night. I have pictures I took before the show started, or I might be able to convince myself the whole thing was just a dream. For one night, I sang in front of a live audience, I think. So let me see if I got any comments on that story after I wrote it. I did. I got 5 comments, but first of all, I'm going to see if I can fix it so that I can see my YouTube comments here this afternoon. Let me figure out how I did that last time. Went into my studio, I think. And let me see. I went to content maybe, and to live. And is it going to show my comments? I'm not sure. Maybe. Okay, there we go. Okay. It looks like we had a couple of people. Somebody, I think, maybe thought I was mom, but I'm sorry, I don't have a child named William. I have a Steve and a Jonathan. And, okay, so no comments on the story itself, but I was wanting to ask, I wrote down a question that I was wanting to ask. Since I'm reading my own stories here on YouTube, I was wondering if maybe you have a favorite book that you think that everyone should read. If you wouldn't mind leaving that comment, leaving that the name of the book and the author, if you remember, in the comments so that everyone can see. And who knows, you might just turn somebody on to a really good book. I will say that one of my favorite books is by Kathleen Woodiwiss. She's an older author. In fact, I think she might have passed away at this point. But one of the books that I think I've read just about everything that she's written, but one of the books that I enjoyed the most was called Ashes in the Wind. And it was a historical romance set in the Civil War. And it was just really good. She had a really good grasp of just what it would be like to live day to day in that time period. But I think most really good world building authors also have that skill, but she was really good. She also wrote a book called Shanna. That was the very first one that I read of hers. And but Ashes in the Wind just has a special place in my memory and in my heart, I guess. Also, another book or a series that I really enjoyed was a sci-fi series by Isaac Asimov called Foundation. And I understand that that I'm not sure if it was Apple TV, or I'm not sure which platform it is that actually turned it into a series. I always thought it would make a really good television show, but that it would be kind of difficult because it spanned such a long period of time. So let me see, James, your favorite is James Patterson. I worked at the library here in the town that I live a couple of years ago, and James Patterson was always one of the most popular authors. But I don't know that I've ever read anything by James Patterson. Did he have anything made into any television series, maybe? I'm thinking that maybe he did, but I could be thinking of a different author. there have been a lot of authors who have uh, somehow managed to connect with Hollywood and have their series turned into, especially if they're series. If it's just a one-off book, maybe not quite so much, but a lot of the prolific authors like James Patterson, I mean, he had a huge section there at the library. It was probably 3 or 4 shelves of just nothing but his books. And I think he also co-authors with some other writers. If I'm thinking of the right, if I'm thinking of the right author, I think he co-authors, and maybe that's another way that he manages to publish so much and so often. I liked Foundation because it's sort of the reason I like Star Trek is because it gives an optimistic, or at least a hopeful uh, picture of what the future for humanity would be like. And so that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it as well. All right, now let me see if I can get back to my story, the next story that I wrote on Medium. And let me see, there we go. I just need to separate the pages. Okay. And let me try to scooch it over so I can share the screen here. Okay. And go back to the very next story or article that I wrote after One Night Only in Boston, or at the Boston Theater rather. Okay, so the very next story that I wrote was actually more of an article. It was about the Medium platform itself, because at the time I was really into reading about, or to writing, excuse me, about the Medium platform itself. That seemed to be a very popular topic for people to read about. And someone had written an article about plagiarism, I think, and it just, the way that I read it just struck me at the right moment, I guess, to where it just seemed a little funny, a little humorous. And so I wrote a piece about it called "Someone Just Told Me to Steal Your Stuff, and So I Did." I'll try to, I don't know why it was easier to share my screen the other day. Well, not share it, but split it. Okay. Alrighty, we are almost there. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to... Okay. I read an article today by another author that made a pretty bold statement. He said, nothing here is new, folks. There's no idea that hasn't already been done, no topic that hasn't been researched to death. I checked, and he's right. I did a Google search on widgets. 797 million results as of this date. The topic of love, about 9 billion results. How to make an NFT, 341 million results. Let's face it, if I want to write about my new favorite hobby or just any random topic, I'm probably not going to be telling you anything you didn't already know or haven't read somewhere else. If I go ahead and write something, is it considered stealing? If it's not new? Yes and no. Yes, the idea and information is already out there, and I'm taking it to do whatever I want with it. But unless I'm plagiarizing and copying word for word, technically it's not considered theft. Then what's the point of writing the article? What can I give you that you don't already have? I can give you my point of view. And of course, if any of you write, you know that anything that you write is usually told from your own point of view. I can use my own words to explain, to theorize, to elucidate, to expand upon, to put my own brand of humor on, or put my own spin on it. That's what each of us brings to the table. Our particular way of expressing our thoughts, experiences, and feelings through our own style of writing. So I challenge you, write this same article. Write this article that I just wrote. Make the same points. I don't care. It's not like I invented the information or took out a patent. I didn't have a copyright, nothing. So just put your own spin on it. Let's give the algorithm something to talk about. Okay, and so I didn't get very many comments on that one from other writers, but one other writer said, we have equal rights in the words. We have equal rights to the words, Judy. We infuse them in our own proportions. Some of us manage to make a heady mix that bears our label. And Shamim says, I agree with you. Interesting and factual read. Well, he didn't elucidate much, did he? But that's okay. I've read plenty of articles that he wrote as well. I will say that I've never needed to plagiarize anyone's stuff. I have taken ideas from other people just because my brain works in a little bit of a different way, but everyone's does. So, when you think of a specific topic, then it's possible that that same topic could spark an entirely different train of thought in someone else. And then that would be a fresh story, a fresh take on the topic because it's what's in your head. The very next article that I wrote, I actually did this as a little bit of an answer to a challenge, because there was another writer on there who was talking about how some writers, some authors had written pieces that annoyed her and that irritated her. And she mentioned specifically about people who used the words boss babe, which I had never heard of before, and people who were using the term tummy button. So, of course, I must have been in a mood at the time because I thought that was hilarious. And I wrote an article called How the Boss Babe Located Her Tummy Button and published it February the 4th of 2022 on medium.com. Once upon a time, there was a friendly young girl whose nickname was the Boss Babe. She felt very powerful when people would refer to her by her nickname, as she was a solopreneur. Oh, that was another word that she said irritated her, who coached other people to become solopreneurs. Boss Babe had traveled the world doing digital nomad stuff. She loved taking off on her camel through the desert with her laptop in the right saddlebag, searching for the elusive 5G she'd heard about recently. She taught classes on how to become a digital nomad and work from anywhere in the world. Boss Babe had just completed her third book entitled How to Collab as a Digital Nomad. It was a New York Times bestseller within a week, as people mostly just wanted to find out how to locate their tummy button, which was on page 52. Okay. And so then, okay, so I put a link into the article that inspired, I called it A Bit of Fluff. And the name of the article was Five Words That Need to Be Banned. So I know Boss Babe was one, tummy button was two, if you count that as one word or maybe just a phrase. And then solopreneur. I'm not sure what the other two were without, finding her article and reading it again. But it was pretty cute and I enjoyed it. And so I got a comment back from her after I had written it. Let me see. So Janet says, "You got me. Nearly left, but I figured it out. Hilarious." And then Susan said, "OMG, laughing. Thank you." And let me see. Victoria said, "OMG, you wrote the piece of my nightmares." So I'm pretty that I don't know. Was that the one who wrote it? It was by Victoria. No? I am not sure. I think it was by Victoria. Because I did thank her for the random word challenge. Okay. All right. So I'm going to, okay, so earlier I had asked the question, and I don't know if you were able to leave a comment yet, but I had asked the question, do you have a favorite book that you think everyone should read? I mentioned a couple of my favorites, but I thought it would be nice if you would leave a comment so that other people can enjoy something that you've read that you've really enjoyed. So if you have a favorite book, please leave it in the comments. I would be interested in checking them out, seeing if the local library has it, or maybe through they also have an online library that has a lot more titles in it, so I could probably find it. Okay. So The Secret. I don't know if I've read The Secret. That's not a James Patterson book, is it? I know you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you liked James Patterson, but I'm thinking back through the books in the library that I remember because I shelved them so many times. But you know what? He could have had one called The Secret, and maybe it was an older book. But if you've got the author, that would help a lot. Well, I can always do a search for it on Amazon and maybe find it that way. Okay, so the very next story that I wrote is actually an article because as a writer on medium.com, most everyone is always looking for either writing prompts or topic ideas or any other way to help spark an idea in their imagination. And so one of the things that helped me find ideas on what to write was checking through Twitter. And so I did leave an article as a suggestion so that others could maybe get inspired as well. And so this article starts out, most days I get up with ideas already buzzing around in my head. I try to make notes on everything I'm thinking about to capture ideas before they dissipate. I hate having that feeling that there's some great idea I thought of earlier that I just didn't write down fast enough. Have you ever had one of those days when you just think there's nothing else to write about? It's all been done, so what else is there to write about? And then this leads into self-doubt about your writing ability itself. Am I even a writer? What if this is not what I'm meant to do? And it just spirals down from that point. That's when you need to start getting creative. Start digging a little harder for topics to write about. Yep, time to check out the experts. One writer that I would place in that category is Anders. Andy, he writes on Medium platform as well. His article on writing fatigue has some pretty great tips, but one of the best tips in the entire article was about using Dickey's Endless Idea Generator. I hadn't even heard of it before this. After typing in Endless Idea Generator on Twitter, there it was. Around 30 thread posts giving out tips and hints and tricks under the subheading. How to generate 100 ideas to write about in 30 minutes, even if you think you have nothing to say. So you might want to check that out. It's been a while since I've checked that out on Twitter. Sure, I know what you're thinking because I see it also. It's just a giant plug for his upcoming Ship 30 for 30 course in March. It cost $499, which I can't afford until I start earning a bit more from Medium, which he'd probably tell me is the reason I need the course, and he might be right. For now, I can glean so much information just from the Twitter tips alone, and I couldn't wait to share them with those of you who haven't seen them yet. While I won't plagiarize what Dickie Bush had said on Twitter, I'd like to quote him as saying, "One of the biggest mistakes beginner writers make is thinking they have to be an expert to write about something. But this is wrong. The truth is, people don't want to learn from experts. They prefer to learn from those just a few steps ahead of them on the same path." And, I've found that's pretty much true on any platform that I've been on. There are so many people that videos that we watch, and they may not have the most subscribers or even the most views, but if we feel like they've learned something and they're closer to the problem, just like we are, then we feel like we can learn something from them. They have something to share and we can learn from it. I would urge you to go check out Dickie's tips on generating fresh ideas for your own writing. It's a process, but it's worth it. Thank you, Andy, for your article on writing fatigue, and Dickie Bush for his wonderful tips on Twitter. And I got a couple of comments on that. Lisa said, "Great idea. So far, I have 50 ideas and counting of my own saved up. This will definitely come in handy if I ever get a point that I need. No, if I ever get to the point where I need an idea." Oh, and Andy commented back too. He says, "Thank you for the mention, Judy, and I'm so very happy to share inspiration and ideas." I always like it when I've highlighted an author and then they reply back. It's just it's very encouraging and it's motivating to keep on helping others, especially. Okay. So if you haven't already left a favorite book that you think everyone should read, would you mind leaving that in the comments? I'm trying to get some ideas for my next reading project. If you don't help me, then my daughter, who's heavily into fantasy, will give me some of her books, and then I won't have anything to come back with. I'll be like, okay, I have plenty of time now because I have nothing else to read. Okay, my next article that I wrote was published, I think it's actually a fiction piece, was published on February the 5th of 2022, and it is called South to the City. Okay. And James, I have read Twilight, the trilogy, but thank you for leaving it, because it's just, and the movies are just old enough too, to where there could be others who might be interested in reading those. And I enjoyed the movie version, but I always think that the book has so many more details that the movies leave out. So I always enjoy reading the written story as opposed to the movies. Even though I do get an idea of, like, when I'm reading a book and I haven't seen the movie, if it's been made into a movie, then I make up a picture of who I think the person looks like, and it might be somebody from my past, or maybe somebody that I've seen on TV, but once I've seen the movie first and then read the book, then I always have the actor in my mind whenever I'm reading the story. But either way, it does, picturing the people makes it easier to picture the events that are going on. And I'm sure everyone does that, right? Okay, so my next story that I'm reading is called South to the City, published on February the 5th of 2022. There's a little abandoned house by the lake a few miles from here. Some family used to come every summer to swim and enjoy the country for a few weeks, but the children grew up and went away to college, and the parents never traveled anymore, so no one had come in over a decade. Bobby Sue didn't know that when she ran away from her stepdad just after her 16th birthday. She just needed a place to sleep out of the rain. She just wanted a quiet place where no one would find her, and she'd be safe from the belt and an angry temper that her mom had married. When she stumbled on the little lake cabin, she only meant to spend the night. Even though the house had a thick coat of dust on everything, still, you never knew when someone might come back. But Bobby Sue had been coming down with a cold for a day or two, and that night she got a fever and felt so sick the next day that she couldn't even get up without her head spinning. It was 2 days before she could sit up and sip from her water bottle. Later that same day, she went to the kitchen and rummaged around in the cabinets before finding a can of soup. It was old, but not rusted, so she hoped it would still be edible. Once she figured out how to light the burners on the propane stove, she heated the soup and left the fire on to take the chill out of the cabin. Bobby Sue settled on the old, soft brown sofa with a comforter wrapped around her and enjoyed her bowl of hot chicken soup. She wondered if her mom was worried about her, or if everyone was just glad she'd finally gone. Most of the screaming was done at her, so maybe Mom could have a little peace and quiet now. What if they didn't even miss her at all? What if it really had been all her fault that everyone was so stressed out and angry? Maybe she really was a burden, like her stepdad said. He had told her often enough how she needed to shut her mouth, that she was too disrespectful, that she was just another mouth to feed and always needing something. Shoes, clothes, girl stuff. It was better this way, she thought. Better for her, better for them. It occurred to her that she'd need to get her own food and clothes now. How would she be able to do that? She knew there were some fruit trees in the area that she could pick from. She might be able to grow food, but that took time, and she wasn't even sure she could stay here long enough to start a garden. She let the comforter trail on the floor behind her as she went to check out the kitchen again. The fridge was completely empty. Same with the freezer, but the electricity had been off for a while, so obviously someone had planned it that way. There were some packaged beans and rice and lots of canned foods that still looked fine. She'd have to find some fresh food soon. Maybe she'd better try to keep walking somewhere else. Maybe a nearby town would be easier. She had done babysitting before, and one of the neighbors had paid her $10 to rake their yard last year. She could do that kind of work again. She was old enough to work in a grocery store, but just the idea of asking made her nervous. With the courage and optimism that only comes with the ignorance and innocence of youth, Bobby Sue made a decision. There was no way she was ever going back to face her stepfather. She was grown. She needed to start acting like an adult now. She would stay here in the little lake cabin for a few more days, and then she'd head south to the city to start her new life. And that was a little story that I published in February of 2022. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. Oh, and right about that time, apparently in January of that year, I started writing on a platform called Simile. And Simile was primarily for fiction. And so I moved some of my stories over there since Medium doesn't mind if you publish your stories on other platforms. And so I wrote a small article about how much money I had earned by writing on Simile. And of course, that was just for the month. Many of you are already familiar with Simile, a new platform with a focus on fiction writing, although just about any type of story is accepted. Nonfiction, personal narrative, opinion pieces, memoir. Those are tags for just about every genre of fiction you need. I submitted my first story with Simile on January the 18th. Plus, I moved a couple of my Medium short stories over the same day. Poof, the next morning, they had both been viewed, and cha-ching, I'd made 6 cents. Woohoo! I enjoy Simile because I can really focus on writing flash fiction, short stories with a punch. And I have so many ideas for short stories, it's hard to get to them all, but I try to publish at least one story per day. Today, I've published 51 posts. Some of them were Medium stories, which is okay to submit, and several are new fiction pieces that I haven't posted to Medium yet. So I need to go back and see if I can get on Simile to my old account and pull those stories off too. Because I've talked before, my purpose in reading my pieces that I've written on Medium is so that if something happens to me, I should say if and when, that my children will be able to see me reading my own stories that I've written from that platform that I've written in the past. And I don't want to lose that. And they might not be able to access those accounts. So this is a good way for you to leave something for the people who care about you. I wish that my mother and grandmother had done the same thing. I know my mother was interested in writing as well, but it would have been so much nicer to hear her reading her own stories. Okay, the article that I wrote just after that was, apparently was another article about Simile. How about that? Well, most of the people that were reading my pieces at the time on Medium are those writers on the platform who were always interested in ways to earn more money from their writing, whether it was fiction or their other tech articles or whatever they were writing about at the time. Simile allows so many different genres and topic areas to write about that you're sure to find an audience here. And unlike Medium, Simile pays through PayPal, so writers from countries that don't allow Stripe payments can still get paid for most of their writing pieces. Some of the categories you can write in are adventure, book reviews, classic literature, coming of age, contemporary fiction, culture and current events, drama, faith, fantasy, fiction, flash fiction, horror, humor, interview, listicles, memoir, mystery, nonfiction, opinion piece, poetry, true story, and many more. What I've found is that just about any piece you've written can be transferred over to Simile. Cut and paste works just fine. At first, I was only writing fiction stories to add to Simile. I then moved many of my medium fiction stories over. Then I realized that if I tweaked some of my nonfiction stories, I could move even more of my finished pieces over. I'm sure you have stories that you could repurpose as well. Okay. I didn't start to keep track of daily earnings from Simile until about 10 days after I signed up. On January 27th, my earnings were at $1.30. On January 28th, my earnings total was $1.34. That's with 30 stories posted. On January 29th, my earnings was $1.40. And I'm not going to go through the whole list. I think I kept looks like maybe 2 weeks worth of, and when it finished up, it was $2.56. And the thing about it is that Simile has a payout minimum of $10. At least they did back then. It's been a while since I've been on the platform, I will admit, and they may have changed that. So basically, I've never gotten paid for anything that I wrote on Simile yet. Okay, oh, that wasn't the end of the article, and I thought that it was. Right now, Simile is still in beta. Yes, they are still working a few bugs out. I think that's the definition of beta. But I've messaged Simile on Twitter and got almost instantaneous feedback, so I'm very encouraged by that. When you sign up now for an account, like Medium, you can write for free. There's a limited story count. Or you can sign up for $1.99 the first month and $6.99 for each month after. And like I said, that was at that time. I'm not sure that Simile has changed its rules on, its requirements for being monetized or anything like that. Simile has stated their intention to eventually get to a payout plan similar to Medium's. And as part of the beta group, you'll have a head start on a new platform. And they're still in business, so I'm guessing that they're doing okay. You'll notice some familiar faces and names on Simile, but hopefully you'll see lots of new people and exciting reads as well. Make new friends and encourage them to use your Medium Partner Program link to sign up over here, which at the time seemed like a win-win. The thing about Simile is that because it was just like with Medium, I think the very first month that I was writing on Medium, I earned about $7 and something, which wasn't a lot, but it was more than the $5 that I paid each month to be part of the Medium.com partner program. And so Simile, I never reached that point with Simile. So I eventually stopped writing. They still have my stories, but yeah, I should check it out and see. I might have met the minimum. I should check that out and see. You know, one of the things that I always enjoyed about singing was the fact that I could sing in an empty room, especially if the acoustics were good, and there wasn't anyone around to listen to me, and it was always just a little fun to do that. And this is the feeling that I'm getting by going live on YouTube. I get the feeling that, I mean, there's this sense of freedom because in a way it's almost like you're singing in a room to nobody but yourself, or you're dancing, and unless, I guess, unless you got a bunch of trolls commenting on you about how horrible you were at dancing or singing, that you probably wouldn't even mind. Okay. I'm going to, I'm only going to be streaming for 1 hour today. And so I still have about 15 minutes. So I'm going to read another story. And then, and this is a short story too, a short fiction piece. And then, before I finish up, I will leave the question pinned at the top, as a comment, that if you have a favorite book that you think everyone should read, please leave that in the comments so that other people can enjoy the same things that you've written, the same things that you've enjoyed reading. Sorry. Okay, my last story that I'm reading is called The Babylonian Cipher. I think this was a word prompt because cipher is not a word that I would ordinarily use in my writing, so it's probably just a writing prompt. I know you think I look a little long in the tooth. Yesterday, I turned 4,179 years old. That's right. No, I'm not a vampire, but I do have a secret. Would you like to know what it is? Come with me over here. Shh, closer. Listen, I have enemies. There are people who suspect that I am not of this generation. They would kill to have this secret I hold. Why am I going to share it with you? Yes, that is a reasonable question, but you must agree to accept the risk that this knowledge will bring you. I am a member of an ancient tribe descended from the kings of Babylon. I'm aware that you think Babylon is not a real place. Your beliefs are not relevant. Centuries ago, we swore to give up all human vices. I have never committed a sin on purpose. Yes, I tell you the truth. To not say the truth would be suicide. Listen to me, there is not much time. What would you give to never age? There are benefits. You will never look older than you do right now. You will never need a physician of any kind. You would have millennia to develop your talents, to amass wealth. This opportunity is only open for the span of one moon every 100 years. Not many choose this life. They are short-sighted and soon gone from the face of the earth. Those who take their place among us have access to the wisdom of the universe. No, this offer does not apply to your entire family. If you cannot see its value, I pity you. Finish your drink over there on the table. Did I mention that once I walk out of the door, you will have no memory of our conversation? Enjoy your family and your short life. I did get a couple of comments on that story after I wrote it. Jimmy wrote, live forever but no sins. I'm curious what that looks like. Is it compulsory or a choice that can cause you to die? Regardless, this was really interesting. And I answered, I don't know. My muse made me write this story. I wanted it to be something completely different, but she said no. The story must be written this way, LOL. Oh, and he answered too. He said, I like this idea. I'll say that much. I think I'll have to repurpose the idea and write my own short story. I wonder if he ever did. I'll have to go check it out and see now. And Sweet Chaos, I'm assuming that wasn't the name that they were born with, said, I like the twist of the memory being gone once the person walked out of the door. That was a fun little piece to write. I don't think anyone else has left any comments on their favorite author or their favorite book. So I hope someone else will leave some more comments so that when this video gets watched again, that people can see your suggestions for your favorite author and your favorite book. Okay, let me see. Alrighty, so after the Babylonian Cipher, I wrote a very, very short piece called Voices. Okay, I'm going to read this one now. This might actually be the last story that we get to read today. The voices wouldn't stop. It had been 8 days since they'd started, 4 now that he'd been afraid to go outside. Whispers at first, gradually growing louder, constant murmurs, suggestions, questions. On and on they continued. Why? One whispered. I don't know, came the answer. What do you mean? They would talk to each other. It wasn't as if they were even trying to communicate with him, as if they weren't aware of him, or that they were being overheard, or where they were. The voices overlapped so that several conversations were going on at the same time, and he couldn't keep track, didn't even try. The conversations just continued. He couldn't block them out, couldn't talk loud enough now to talk over the sounds in his head. He'd tried telling them to shut up. Move my cursor down here. He'd tried to answer some of their questions. He'd tried to talk back and ask them some questions of his own. Nothing worked. Then he'd searched for a doctor. Well, that part was fuzzy. He'd pick up the phone and then forget who he wanted to call. The voices were driving him crazy. He opened his eyes, trying to shield them against the bright light overhead. Movement caught his attention, and he found himself looking into the warm gray eyes of a doctor. Welcome back, John, he began with a smile. You've been in a coma for over a year, but you're going to be just fine. About 8 days ago, we noticed a change in your brain activity, and we began to hope you'd recover. We called your family in, he continued in a soothing voice. They're on their way. You just take it easy, okay? You're going to be okay. I always like the stories with a little bit of a twist toward the end. I don't know if I could write a long novel for the very same reason, because once I think of a twist to the story, then I just, that's all I can focus on is just what the twist was and getting the story out and onto a piece of paper. And Mark said, he commented, he said, "Another great story, Judy. Hey, whatever happened to that character from your other story that got sent to Chicken, Alaska?" And I answered, I said, "We might have to pay him another visit, eh?" So, and sure enough, we did. We did get back to the guy who was banished to Chicken, Alaska. And that story is coming up pretty soon. So let me see. After this one called Voices, what did I? It might have been like, I don't know, pretty soon after that, because when Mark commented, yep, it's just 2 more stories away. The next story in the list is Playdate in the Park, and then the one after that is called Chicken, Alaska, The Saga Continues. And so I think I'm going to save both of those for tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll start off with Playdate in the Park. And then we'll find out whatever happened to the guy who got sent to Chicken, Alaska. So I appreciate your being here. If you have a favorite book that you think everyone should read, please leave it in the comments below so that we can all check it out. If you have a favorite author, we'd love to check it out. And that's it for today, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.